Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? Been doing another little stream man Finatr here. Um, I think we'll probably do one more of these and then maybe switch to a different topic for a week or two. Um, we got a couple things left to sort of finish up on what we were working on last time. Wow. Haha. Apparently words are hard this morning. But couple things leading into that. First of all, I should actually grab it a link. I made this some time ago, and it was. I mean, in some ways, it's a niche thing, so that has kind of led to this situation. But I made a Discord specifically for Finatr. But it's not a project by itself that has made that Discord valuable. But something that I've kind of been interested in is sort of like focusing on and working on developing the community around the things that we do on stream. I am obviously involved with Tauri, and there's very much community there. And actually, speaking of which, I forgot to put the a link to the stream there. Hey Bogdan, good to see you. So what I've basically been doing is over the past few days, I've been slowly transitioning the Discord that I had originally made specifically for Finatr into a little bit more general thing to just like cover the topics that we've been doing on stream and give folks a place to hop in and we can chit chat basically like in between streams. As I was especially feeling the disconnect, like I missed talking to y'all because I was gone for like 3 weeks. So that really got me thinking about it. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop a link, and I'll probably bring it up a few more times. Where is? There we go. There's the bar. I'm gonna drop the link now, and I'll probably drop it in a couple more times during the stream. But join the Discord if you do the Discord thing and you're interested in topics that we go through on stream. It's not going to necessarily be like a support type channel, but just so we can have deeper or otherwise continue conversations that we start on stream. So now that we got that out of the way, let me let's see. I need to share the link. So there is a thread also in the where is my Discord? Close a couple other things here. I don't need all that stuff open. I just restarted my computer here. There is a cool. Thanks for joining, Bogdan. You brought pizza. Thanks for bringing pizza. I appreciate it. Almost forgot to drop the link. So there's a Tauri Discord. And we do have a thread in the showcase there, and I've been dropping my stream links there for some time. And that's worked reasonably well. As far as like continuing conversations, but it's starting to, you can't thread in a thread. So there's a lot of reasons here that I was like, it feels like it's time to go through the effort of getting that Discord going, so we can continue our conversations. All right, we got a bunch of stuff today, And actually, not now that I just realized I forgot to pull up my to do list here. Um, okay, we're clicking the button. All right, let's flip on over here and let's start digging into stuff. I've got a couple all like a random topics today, but we'll get into the actual like topic of the day. Um, so I've had like that Discord link here. I'm really bad at just like bringing stuff up. I always feel like I talk about stuff too often, but in reality, it's like not nearly enough. Um, but I've had the button there for a while, and that's pretty much been the only way folks have joined. So that is the driving reason that it hasn't grown very much. The Discord specifically, at least. But carom seeds. What are what are those? I don't think I've actually heard of that. We're gonna slight tangent. Ugh, AI overview. I don't. Does it have a different name in the U.S.? Bishop's weed. That sounds caraway. Oh, is it like a type of cumin? Okay, okay, I feel that. You know, we haven't actually cooked too much. Like we haven't been intentful about cooking Indian food, but I've been meaning to for a really, really long time. Um, my wife's not big into coconut, which has sort of prevented us from doing any kind of curry. I used to live like downtown in my area, and that there was a fair number of Indian restaurants that I could get to get that fix, you know. Um, but I don't anymore. So I've kind of been craving Indian food lately. Um, but I need to figure out a recipe that I can introduce into. Um, I mean, I could probably get my wife on board, but my kids might take a little bit more effort, so we'll have to work them into it a little bit. Um, but yeah. Like this is the kind of stuff that um, will be great to talk about in the Discord. Feel free to share some recipes. I actually have, as we're on a tangent here. Um, I think that's still live. I don't think I broke it. Yeah. I like talking about food. I feel like food is so inherent to culture. And part of what I enjoyed when I was traveling often was like experiencing the culture. I mean, it's kind of cool to see architectural features and buildings and landmarks. Um, but like so much of what makes a place is also the culture. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with the food. So I literally have a page on my site for the dishes that we cook reasonably often. Um, this actually comes out of an Airtable instance that we mostly keep up to date. I'm not also great about that, but you know, things. Anyways, okay. So what are the other things that we wanted to do today? I forgot to start my list, which is going to goof up my timestamps, which is unfortunate, but is what it is. So that being said, I do want to actually plug in the new keyboard. We'll get to that. Um, and then potato soup, cumin, and caraway and yogurt. See, like I think I could get that going and as something that the kids might be into. We make a we've got a potato soup recipe that like is generally well liked. So whenever we make the potato soup, everybody seems to eat it well, which is it's always good to find those kind of recipes. Okay, so plug in the new keyboard. We'll touch on that in a second. I did notice that I opened up a PR for, how should I say this? I opened up a PR for the work that we did last week, and we have a couple tests that are failing. So we'll fix playwright tests with new input. I'm guessing it's just a selector issue, so I don't think it'll be too bad. Because we made the actual, cat's going wild here. We made the actual like input field more dynamic based off of other inputs. That's part of what we did last week, and the PR for that, the tests are failing. So we'll fix those, and then I think we'll kind of go from there. There's a couple high level things that I've been thinking about in as far as dealing with or otherwise adding in here. I also need to update and create some more issues, but I think we'll come to that. So keyboard, let's go with that. So I love checking off things. Also, it makes my timestamps. So I've been trying to add timestamps to all the streams, in part for y'all to quickly reference pieces of the stream because they do get long, but also the it's also like a for personal use cases too, because one of the things that I've done a little bit of and I want to continue to do more of is do little clips and shorts, and then also slightly longer videos, but not nearly as long as a live stream. So something like a 10-minute video, and those will be more concise information, potentially on topics that we've already done on stream. And if I have a way to quickly reference back to what we did on stream, that makes that process to writing the video easier. So part of the reason we made this was to make timestamps. All right, so keyboard. I got here, I guess I'll unplug this piece. I got a split keyboard. Couple of reasons for it. I went with the Voyager ZSA board. Come on, focus. There we go. There's a few reasons, I guess. In part, I don't know, getting old sucks. And I think it was just that I slept funny, and I woke up and, man, like a couple of my like spinal joints, whatever things, were just way out of whack, and it got worse and worse and worse to where it was like affecting my nerves in my fingers, and I was worried that it was carpal tunnel, but I had suspected that it might not be. So I figured out that like there's other ways I could sit, which kind of points to it not being carpal tunnel. And then I ended up going into the chiropractor because it wasn't getting any better. And I think we've kind of figured out that it was just something in my back, and it's better in part because I've been trying to fix my posture. And part of that is when you have a keyboard, it sort of lends itself to the like, hunched over, this kind of feel. So that's part of it. That now with a split keyboard, my hands can be, like at reasonable shoulder resting distance. But also I've kind of just been interested in them interested in them for a while, because I don't know, they're kind of cool. but also like, it's probably one of those common traits that if you're a programmer, it seems like it's relatively common to have the trait of like wanting to optimize the heck out of stuff. So part of the like, and I think the reason that folks in software tend to get deep into keyboards is just like an optimization type mentality. Like that's something that really like, it gives them the dopamine, as it were. And I feel that a little bit. And so I've always kind of been interested in it just because like, um, I could feel that there was movements that uh, they didn't hurt, but it's possible that over time they could begin to give my hands pain. And there was a little bit of the like, pain in my palm kind of situation. So I was starting to like get bits and pieces of those, like maybe it makes sense to go into this because part of the split keyboard is the and specifically why I went with this one is because it doesn't have a whole ton of keys, which means that I have to be a little bit more uh, direct about um, the keys that matter and placement of the keys. And I have the ability to change placement of keys to where I can basically like reduce the amount of movements I need to do. So, um, I've not actually run it on this computer yet. We we've been. I put together at least the key caps and the switches on stream like 2 years ago, and I've been using this one for a while. I like it, and I generally like the switches. Um, the switches are the bit that actually registers, and otherwise like when you press it, it's the thing that is mechanically telling the computer that the key was pressed. Um, so like I don't dislike the keyboard, and I'll probably use it for whatever computer I'm not like on main right now. So I've part of it is that I got this, and I've only been using it on my Mac because that's what I use for work. And I just haven't gone through the effort of actually like plugging it in here. So we're gonna try plugging it in. I think I'm pretty sure it flashes it to the board, so I think it's gonna keep all my stuff, as it were. So I don't think I'm gonna need to worry too much about like changing setup or whatever. I do need to like move things around a little bit though. So give me 1 second. I didn't bother doing the overhead camera, but you should be able to actually see the key map in here, and I can always like share it in the Discord or whatever if folks are interested in that. Um, but I've had a keyboard for a few weeks, so um, for better or worse, you're not going to see typing that's terribly painful. It is definitely one of those things that um, it's ortholinear, so you don't have the keys that are like if you look at a quote unquote normal keyboard, the keys don't align vertically. There's offsets in the keys. And I don't know, there's theories and reasons why that was done. Some of which, if the theory on why it was originally done is true, it doesn't actually hold true anymore. So that there's some like, uh, you know, the way you typed on a, um, gosh, what is that called? Typewriter. The way you typed on a typewriter is different than you type on a keyboard. And so there's some theories like I don't know how many of these are true or whatever, but I've read that some of the theories are the reason the layout was just decided was because it reduced mistakes when you're typing on a typewriter. But that's less applicable now that especially backspace is a thing. So one of the things that they've said is that ortholinear is better, and that's because you don't have these like slight adjustments back and forth. So ortholinear would be they line up vertically, um, and you can see actually that they're offset to kind of line up with how your fingertips go. Can I get the do. So that's kind of all the keyboard stuff I'm gonna in theories that I'm gonna talk about right now. But there was enough interest there that it and enough reasons that it justified. Oh my gosh, what is with this cord here? It justified giving it a shot and going through that initial pain of basically trying to learn and adjust your muscle memory to got all this cat hair on it too. Adjust the muscle memory to basically compensate for this. That looks good. Okay, so I'll hit connect. There we go. It looks like it mostly kept it. It's pretty close to default. Like on this layer, I don't use any of this. Pretty much none of these I touch. I'll use these. And on this layer, I use this. I really don't use those number keys. So I haven't like really honed it in. Like I wouldn't call it tight, but it's functional. It gets the job done, and I'm happy enough with it to actually continue typing in it. It was one of those things that like the first the first like day or three, I think I was changing it like every 30 minutes because it was one of those things that like I go to press a key and I'm like, I don't have a dollar sign or something on here. Um, I'm like, what? So it's like some of the symbols just weren't on the default. So I had to change them. So I was changing stuff quite a bit. We'll see the way that you use option and command and control on Mac is substantially different than you do using those same type of keys on Windows. I don't know if I'm gonna like this stuff, but we'll give it a shot. I can at least like a reasonably type with this. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just pop it over in the corner here, and we'll go like this, and y'all can see as I hopefully not completely failed type on the new keyboard. I also got these little silicone things. They're supposed to go under the keys and give it a little bit more funk, as it were. They're slightly clicky, but not too bad. Okay, so I think that, and this is the other thing, like when I do hotkeys on a computer, I get the hotkey and like that the way I press it's ingrained into my brain to where I'm not thinking about the keys I'm pressing. I'm thinking I want to do this hotkey to do the thing. That's the one thing that's I've had the hardest time translating over is I go to do a hotkey and I'm like, what buttons do I actually press? I think it's Alt. I think it's Alt and space. But see, yeah, that doesn't work. Oh, there we go. Okay, tap. Okay, all right. You can work with this. So, new keyboard is plugged in. Let's go ahead and open up our playwright test here. We'll get that rolling. And actually, I guess as a slight aside, Bogdan's got a question in the Discord. Let's touch on that real quick. Can I like hide my sidebar so I'm not? I wish the streaming mode came with a little bit more customization in some ways. I guess it doesn't matter too much. Here, we'll go like this. No, not like that. Don't snap. Boop, boop, boop. Okay. Potato soup. You hope this is not just too distracting, but could you cover sponsor in Tauri docs paths and roadblocks for transitioning Electron apps to Tauri? As in, there is this pattern in Electron to Tauri. These patterns could apply. Yeah, we've covered a little bit of the like what you need to learn with Rust, and I made a video on that, and I think the content is reasonably good. It felt good, but the views aren't. It's not picking up the views, which I think is partly clicky title and thumbnail kind of issues. You don't have to learn Rust, but as soon as you start getting into plugins, knowing Rust is quite helpful. So I definitely see where you're coming from. I've actually not used Electron very much, to the point where like I don't know that I could do that unless I actually like made an Electron app and then did a transition of the Electron app. I've actually probably done more with React Native, but honestly, that might have been before Expo was a thing, or at least the Expo was like coming into the scene. And I might have tried it when it was like early Expo, like it had just come out. It's been a minute though, so I don't know. I don't know if I could even do that kind of stuff. Um, I do want to get into, especially in stream, a little bit more around like Tauri ecosystem and working in the project Tauri rather than working with Tauri on stream. But I'm still kind of deciding on like what that looks like. A lot of it is like, especially the stuff I do is more management, talking about how to handle stuff sort of things, or working on side pieces. There's a library that it's actually under my namespace still. I thought about moving it out, but we just haven't gotten to the point where it's made sense or been worth the effort. We use this for publishing within the Tauri ecosystem, in part because we needed a way to handle multiple types of publishing sequences. So there's libraries like change sets, and this, if you squint, is very close to change sets. And it is it's very similar, but it's more configuration driven, and it allows you to publish packages to npm, crates to Rust to crates.io, and we also use it to publish our actions. And I do even also have it hooked up with Finatr. You can see we do change files, and this actually is how I push the site to Netlify and generate the app and create the app release. So like that all happens with Covector. Speaking of things that I need to talk about, like that's I need to be better at talking about it because I think it's very useful. And I think there's plenty of folks that would potentially be interested in using it. But like talking about it and all the documentation is just it's a whole additional level of effort, and just haven't had the time and or made it the priority. So That being said, I think it's definitely an interesting idea. Yeah, there are a few people that have done it. Also a Jacob. Nice. Um, the that might be something that would be interesting to do is potentially talk to or otherwise get folks on the stream that have done a conversion and talk about their process and how they've gone through it. Um, that kind of discussion might be interesting, and that would be something that would be a little bit more approachable for my level of effort that I can put in. Um, Not saying I don't want to; it's just a time thing. You have a I've got a day job and a family. There's only so much time in a day, so I would always love to do more, but you know, it is what it is. Hey, Rudrash, good to see you. Um, so other question. Um, does this that snapping is really annoying. Um, does the keyboard work in Linux or is it just a Windows app? So there's a few companies that do these split keyboards. This one that I have is from a company called ZSA.io. You need to move over here. They're not cheap, but it's a nice keyboard and the software is well done. So they have a flashing utility that actually comes built into, or well, not built into, but they've got a site where you can actually flash directly from the website, and that works on any Chromium-based browser, which is fine. Um, you don't have to have the app unless you're on Windows. So they do have the app, and it does work on Mac, Windows, and Linux, but you don't actually even need to use it on Mac. And I haven't looked at Linux because I don't main Linux in any way. Um, my like actual machines are Windows boxes or Mac, and the times that I'm interacting with Linux are, containers, Docker, Kubernetes, etc. Like that kind of stuff is when I'm getting into Linux. So I'll SSH into a box, or I'll make a Helm chart or whatever. But I don't ever use Linux GUI. So, you know, that is all I know about it. Because this is all I've actually cared about. So on Windows, you do actually have to have the app because it comes with drivers. But I do have it on my Mac as well, just because it's nice to keep this up, because it reacts to my key presses. So what you're seeing is literally my keyboard as I press buttons. So like, hello, chat. And speaking of hotkeys, how do I make this bigger? Nope. I need to do control. So, whoop. See, this is the thing. Like macro, but now I don't have a control button. Because my plus is only on. So here, if we go control and scroll wheel, there we go. This is the kind of stuff that like I've got a macro or I have a hotkey or something that works, but the combination that I have on this keyboard doesn't always like match up and end up working. So long story short, yes, as far as I know, it does work on Linux. They do, and most of my flashing I have done on my Mac through Chrome. Works pretty well. And you can actually send them too. If I go to edit, I think it is. Nope, I don't want this. Okay, I've got way too many browsers at this point. It is honestly kind of frustrating. I started using a hi kitty. Do you want to come say hi? I started using Arc, and then and I waited to actually get into it until they had a like Windows and Android build, and they added those. I was like, lovely. This seems great. And there was a few bugs. I ran into some things that were annoying, and it does seem to have like memory leak type of issues. Don't knock my water over, please. It does seem to have like memory leak issues, but the thing that I ran into was that well, didn't run into. They decided to like pivot and do a um, an AI thing. So I kind of went, well, I guess I'm not going to bother with Arc anymore because it doesn't seem like they want to support the browser that I literally just downloaded. So then I pulled up Vivaldi. I mostly like it. I like the syncing of the tabs that Arc had. Nothing else seems to have that though, which is unfortunate. So I've got this like smattering of when I stream, I got so much random stuff open. When I stream, I use Chrome, and I have a specific profile for Chrome. And yeah, you can see it here. I use Chrome for work. I've got Vivaldi and Arc. All of my like YouTube stuff, because Vivaldi doesn't seem to work well with profiles. Yay. It I still use Arc just to open up my stream stuff on YouTube, like just the YouTube Studio. I don't know. It Vivaldi is really close. I want to make the switch, and I mostly use Vivaldi, both on my, I guess I should say more than just both. I use it on my Mac, my Windows, and on my phone, my Android device. So I mostly switched. Anyways, ta-da layout. What was I talking about? Yes, Root Rush. Where is the link? Discord. Love to see you. Would love to see you stop in if Discord is your. Where did my Discord even go? There we go. Would love to see you hop in if Discord is your speed. Okay, so where are we with stuff? We want to. What is this hotkey again? Alt. This. There we go. Okay. So plug in the new keyboard, and what were we talking about? Tauri and other distractions that I love. All right, we're crossing that off. Let's get into Playwright. So, do I have the code open? I do. All right. So, if we do npm run, it has a little utility that tells me if it would decide to run. There we go. All of the scripts I have, and there's a test end to end. But I want to open up the UI, so I'm going to do an npm run test end to end, and I think that's what you need to do to open up the UI. I might actually just do a hotkey for it. Did it start? I don't think it started the server, so we're gonna have to go do that in a separate tab here. And Finatr, and we want to do an npm start. That's what. Why can't I use that part? I don't have anything else running. I don't think I do. I don't think I do. Why couldn't it use port 1, 2, 3? Oh, did it actually set it up here? It might have actually set it up. All right, let's run something. We'll see if it actually set it or not. Zoidberger. Is that you, Rudrush? You and if you're unaware, you can in. All right, let's see if I can pull over. Doesn't matter if I should probably just like get a thing set up to do it. If you go into user settings, there's a profiles, and you can do per server profiles. So if I do like that they have streamer mode, because some of the stuff I might not actually want to show. I don't remember what's there, but if you go there, you can actually change your profile per server. So if you want to be referred to as Rudrush in the Discord as well, you can change it just for the Discord for the specific server. Okay, cool. It seems like it runs. Let's just do a big run. There's a few, I think there's like 8 that failed. We pushed it up in CI. Whoop, nope, wrong project. Now we pushed it up and it ran in CI. We got the identify build, so it's building fine, but it is failing on the end-to-end test. So if we look, seriously, I might actually have to sign in. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter that much right now. It failed on a bunch. Yeah, we're seeing it now. So if we look, we've got a helper for add generic transaction, and it looks like it's failing there. No. Yes. So this might be an easy fix. We might just need to fix a. Yep, we might just need to fix a helper, and then all of these will end up passing. So part of what I do when I write my tests are, there's really not a great way to do like structured tests with Playwright. And honestly, there's not very many options to do this in general, like in the JavaScript ecosystem. But the idea is that like if I go into a form and make a transaction, that is potentially like a first step. So if we look over here, I've got a hook that before each does a thing. And this actually appears to be pretty close to what I'm doing already with the other ones. But like these are all the same add generic transaction. There's kind of 2 ways you can go about it, and neither of them, I think they're both like valid use cases or valid setups. And I think there's actually reasons to sort of like mix and match where it makes sense. So when you're writing a test, you specifically like in Playwright, you're testing front end code. And that front end code has some expectation of data being there. There's a few ways you can get the data there. But when you're getting the data there, you either need to, through the UI, do some stuff and like make the data like prime the database or prime your data store through the UI, like literally click through and add a transaction. Or you need to like start your test with the data already there. So I think that makes sense in a handful of cases where you just want to make sure that stuff is rendering. So what I tend to do is I mix and match a little bit, where I will have a little bit of like example or starter data. And that's what I use for the like real quick view checks. But most of what I'm doing in the tests here are just making sure the form works, because the form and then the data that comes out of it is on the more involved or more complex side. So checking that form and making sure that process works will catch a lot of the potential issues that we'll run into here. So what I do is, well, I need a transaction to check all of these things. So I have a helper that literally does that. And I can just pull that helper in and use it in every one of these tests. So if we look at, gotta remember my folder structure here. We have transaction and transaction tests that are failing. I've got a helper here. Like I literally call it helper.ts. And I've got 3 different like spec files or test suite files. And they then all import from this helper function. And we have a add a default account. And anytime I'm doing a component like this, I tend to do test.step with playwright, which will then like notate it in the UI. So if we look at, it might actually have it in test here, add default account. So this add default account is a step. So it like groups it in the UI, which is really nice. So I'll use a test.step anytime I'm writing a helper that does this like generic thing. So you can see we did the same thing here, add generic transaction. And we then select date, select option. Okay, so this form or this test here that deletes a recently added transaction does some like initial setup. It goes to the home page, it adds a default account, and then this looks like adding a generic transaction. I'm not quite sure why I didn't use the helper there, but like if you look here, we have a before each that just adds the default account, and then we have add a generic transaction, and we also have this extra actions, which allows me to reuse a bunch of the effort in filling in the form. Because like I always need these values filled in. But then potentially I want to do things that are slightly different. In some ways, it might make sense to actually adjust this step name. So it says something more than add generic transaction, because it's potentially doing more than that. But so we need to fix that step. And is that part of, so select option. Okay, so it's a select option, and this is also, is that also a helper function? Yes, so helper elements. Up 1 folder level to tests. Oh, there is a high level or top level helpers folder. Okay, so I got like multiple levels of helpers here, and what's kind of nice is we can nest this stuff. So I'm doing a select option, which does a little bit of stuff to then actually make that happen. And we do that because these bits, yeah. So the selection menu items in the component that we're using from React Aria seems to be a little sensitive to like how you do it. So rather than just using the select option that comes by default when you have a select component, there's a little bit more going on with the component. So using the built-in playwright function to select an option doesn't seem to work. So we made this basically, which does it in the same way. So the same functional way that you would pretty close to how you would end up using it. If you're using the default playwright setup, it basically encapsulates that effort. So you can see we are doing the same, like select and no repeating from, let's make this a little bit bigger, from repeat type. So the problem is we changed the label. So it's not going to quite work anymore. And I imagine that's probably what's failing on all of them. So we have a select option and it's being passed in from X to options. So we might just need to change the actual selector, which would be, I'm presuming that. Hey, Chubb, good to see you. Hey, if you're, nice food rush, you did the server profile thing. Sweet. What was I going to say? Oh, if Chubb, if you're into Discord in any way, I took in we had a Discord specifically for Finatr, but I have started making it a little bit more generic, and I'm trying to be better about letting folks know that it exists so as to have ongoing conversations. So outside of just the stream, we can do the community thing, as it were, because it I ended up having like I skipped like 3 streams in a row, and I really was like, man, I miss chit chatting with folks about stuff that, I assume there's some mutual interest because y'all keep coming back. So, and I appreciate you. But I like to, keep those conversations going. I do like dev is also in some ways a hobby. So things outside of work that I'm just doing in my free time, being able to talk about those with folks that are also interested would, I'm here for it. Okay, so we're gonna actually have to go to the transaction delete, and we do a select option, repeat type, no repeating. So we're looking for the thing that's called repeat type, and then we're filling in no repeating. It's not called that anymore. So we switched to be, how often does this occur? How often does this occur? And fill it. Whoa, that's not what's my save button now? See, this is the thing. Like on my Mac, I'm pressing this button and S to save. That feels good generally, but it's Control S on Mac. I think I'm gonna have to switch this to be Control on when it's Windows. I don't know if I can do a layout that works across 2 computers though. Like I want this to technically be different. Like I appreciate it that you flashed it to the hardware and it just sticks with the hardware. But also, can I have like I'm on Windows layer versus I'm on, like, I just want it for everything. Windows Explorer. I'm gonna have to look into that because that's gonna be kind of annoying because I want to hit this key in S to actually save. But we'll do this, I guess. So anyways, let's give transaction delete a run and we'll see if that makes it pass. So when I'm writing tests, I generally recommend folks write their tests in a way that a user is actually functionally using your app. What you want to do You don't want to be like testing the internals. Like functionally, it doesn't matter if you move stuff around as long as the UI still works for the user. So like what you're trying to do when you write a test is to reduce the risk of a change. If you make a change, you want to make sure that you didn't break something. And the definition of something being broken is the user is doing a function and it doesn't work how they expect it to. So like in some ways a bug could in theory be like a UX issue, like something's just not clear. That probably isn't always pitched like that. But in my mind, like I think of that as a bug. If there's like an accessibility issue, or if the user is just trying to select a thing or work with a thing, and it's there's a lack of intuitiveness there, in my mind, that should be dealt with like a bug. So kind of in the same way when I'm writing my tests, I want my tests to fail if the expectation of the user has changed. So if you like remove or delete a button, that user is going to have to see the new UI and parse it and try to understand where they now need to instead go to interact or do the thing that they're used to doing. So when I'm writing my tests and I'm doing these selections, what I want to do is make sure that it will continue working for the user. It sucks when you make a change and all your tests break, but what you want your tests to tell you is that the change that you made is not breaking anything else, or not, generally not breaking something. If you make a change, tests are going to fail. But what you want is those tests to actually inform you how things have changed, or how it's like you want to derive some information from the fact that that test failed. And if we align with how the user is using the app and my test fails because I changed a label or a button, I'm fine with that. Like you're aligning your pain with how the user is using the thing. If you're changing the thing around all the time and your tests are constantly breaking because of that, and there's fragility with that, that means that you're aligning your pain with the user. You don't want to be moving stuff around that much for the user. So if it feels painful for you, it's probably going to feel painful for the user. So that means that when all my tests are failing like this, it's an indication that I've changed something, sort of like foundationally. And in some ways that can feel painful, but that's in part why we write these helpers. So in this case, I didn't abstract that out to where I can change it in one spot, but that's not too big of a deal. Because I imagine at somewhat level we can. Well, which ones are failing here? Okay, so modifications is, and okay, so it's probably actually in our before each for this one. So in some cases, like we're going to have to potentially change it in every test. But the point of using the helpers is that like if it's an action that you do repeatedly in multiple tests, you can make that a helper, and that means that you only actually need to make the change in one spot. Yes. I like that. If you're cold, they're cold. Bring your pets inside. Yeah. I talk about that a lot with the folks that I'm working with, that like the fact that your tests fail is not bad. It's the same sort of like philosophy with Rust. The fact that the compiler is showing an error is not a bad thing. It's not something that you should like feel shame about, I guess. Like you should work, especially the Rust compiler. The Rust compiler is really good. You should work with your tests or the Rust compiler in a way that like it's helping you de-risk and understand how you're changing things for the user. And like if the Rust compiler is throwing an error, it's trying to tell you or help you how to fix your code and show you what the actual issue is. So in the same way, like we made a little change, tests failed, but they're failing in a way that makes sense because I've changed the expectation of the user. And this one isn't a big deal because we haven't changed that expectation in a great way. We've mostly just changed a label on an input, so it shouldn't be too bad to change. But again, we're aligning, the same amount of cold that we're feeling is the what the user would also have to experience as well. Okay, where is it failing here? Let's go click over here. So it's in the generic transaction. Do we have a select no repeating from repeat type? I don't have any extra actions here, so it's not failing in an extra action, which is what I was expecting to see. So if we go back to our helper for transactions, repeat type. So actually I just need to change it here. This, again with these hotkeys. Did I even copy this? Here, how often does this occur? Now I need to do right control C. I'm gonna have to remap that. That is not gonna be great for. I've got that. Oh, okay. Oh, gosh. Okay. Control Z. There's no way that muscle memory is gonna change. Control C, Control V. But nope. I'm not. There's no way I'm changing that that muscle memory. So I'm gonna have to figure out. Windows key is definitely not gonna work for. Can I? It's not gonna let me do it on here. I'm not gonna bother trying to flash it right now. We'll have to fix that later. And you get to see me struggle a little bit with it. So we save that. Let's rerun these. And I have a suspicion that the fact that we have a generic transaction and a helper to do as such, that might actually fix all the other ones. So this is, this comes back again to where I've aligned myself with how the user is using it. But the user is not creating 30 transactions every time, to where like the pane isn't perfectly aligned. But the fact that I've written or abstracted out helper functions to do this, to where I only need to change it in one spot, my pane is still aligned, but it's not nearly as bad as if I would have to change it in this many places. Yeah. I think we're good with that, actually. What are we doing for time? I think. Well, let's go ahead and push this up, and then yeah. Let's push this up. I don't think I need to. Okay. Git commit. Guess we just fixed tests. I think I'm gonna end up having to sign in. I've avoided signing in on this computer, in part because, I've avoided signing in on this profile in part because it's easier just not to accidentally show like PII, personal identifying information. Like there's a bunch of repos that I don't necessarily need to be showing to everybody. In part because I like work type things. Okay. So it's been easier just to stay signed out. But if we can't actually even look at our CI run here, that's kind of annoying. We'll at least, yeah, we can even, okay, we can see if it goes green or not. I guess that's something. I might need to sign into this browser though. All right. Because also, like, this kind of comes back to potentially we want to make or otherwise deal with issues both here, but also like I want to do something more with the like overall Tauri project itself. And some of that might be going through and digging into issues. It's a little hard if I can actually like comment or otherwise work with the issue itself. But until then, what is Finatr? Yeah, let's do a quick overview of it. Here we'll give which button are we on? Left, Alt. So Alt, right? Yeah. Okay. Finatr high level overview. Let's give that a quick overview. That'll actually that's a good segue. Thank you for that question. Because we can talk about what it is and what we're trying to do with it, and that might lead us into what we want to start working on next. So it is, hopefully, as it makes clear here, in some ways it's like a budgeting app, but I try not to use that word because it comes with baggage. A lot of the apps out there that help you manage your finances are very much focused on the past and getting in and representing those previous transactions. And I've personally experienced going through all of the effort to get all of my data, my past data, in a good state to where all of my time ends up being spent on that, and I don't actually gain anything out of that process. Like, I don't end up then taking the time to understand or look at the graphs or anything. Like, it getting and understanding what I did previously ends up not actually being helpful. The thing that matters is what you're doing right now the right choice for your goals in the near future, but also like the long future. It's especially a bigger deal now, especially now for folks in the U.S. Like, they've politics and the social security system doesn't feel as stable as it has, both in the near past, but also the long past. And pensions aren't really a thing anymore. So you're kind of in the US on your own for planning for anything that could resemble retirement. So if I want to reduce the amount of time that I'm spending working for folks to give me money, either on a part-time or a full-time capacity, like if I want to fully retire and not actually give my time for a salary anymore, I need to have money set aside. So there's sort of like a you get into like an interview and they're like, what's your future look like in the next 3 months, the next year, the next 5 years, and the next 30 years? And those are all very different questions because how you approach and how you think about it and what you need to do with those is very, very different. Yeah, and the it's a very, very much a different way to think about it, in that what I find valuable is the planning. And exactly, Bogdan, like, the budgeting and knowing how much you spend is important. There's value in having some sort of idea. But honestly, we're human. Like, 95% of finances is like dealing with the human part of it. Um, you see all the advice like don't go out and buy coffee every day. But like, if that's the thing that makes you happy, just plan around that. Like, if that's the thing that really brightens your day, and like you're deriving a lot of happiness from just the process of like making coffee or going and, sitting at the coffee place for a little bit every morning. Like, if that's the thing that really like brings you joy, then why are you trying to cut that out? So like, I th- I really jive with the idea of like planning as a way to prioritize the things that bring you happiness. And it's a thing that's like, I want to prioritize the things that bring me happiness now, but also there's potentially stuff that I should be doing now that can continue to ensure that I uh, can eventually, retire or not work or do other things that make me happy. Like, I've ever since I started working, I've saved a percentage of the money that I made specifically for traveling because I really enjoy traveling, experiencing other cultures like that. That really brings me happiness. I kind of fell out of it a little bit because COVID sort of screwed stuff up. Um, but it's really important for me. So specifically setting aside a certain amount of money that I have no reservations with spending, as long as it's going towards something that looks like traveling or is an experience, um, that brings me happiness. So I'm going to keep on doing that. And that's the thing. Like, I think everybody's like, stuff is not working for me, so I need to budget. And I think folks generally have a good idea of like kind of, or at least some idea of what they're spending. And there is value in it, and there is value in some of that process. And I think it can, again, like, um you know this is 95% human. So if it's a thing where you don't realize or don't have a good feel for what you're actually spending, um budgeting can be helpful. And I did it for a while, and then I kind of fell out of it just because I stopped getting or stopped seeing the value. um but then when I got married to my spouse, talking about money and having that conversations, going through the process of budgeting was helpful because it was a way for us to have that conversation and like align our shared interests. Like, you know, it it becomes it's a partnership. I want to ensure that what I'm doing is also making her happy, and vice versa. So like, now we're planning potentially for shared goals, but also for goals that like I want to ensure that we have enough money to meet whatever goals or whatever level of happiness that my wife derives from whatever. So like, doing that budgeting was useful, and we did it actually for a few years. We were using, I think we mostly used YNAB for that. Um, but then we fell out of it. Like, in the same way, like, we stopped actually getting the value out of it. And I think we both kind of have a good feel for what we spend. And um, we're in a place now where what we spend doesn't matter as much, as long as we're doing all the things that lead to our happiness in the next, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. Cool. Good to see you, Bogdan. Thanks for stopping by, as always. And guess now I'll see you in the Discord. Paul, good to see you. It's been a while. It's been a while, hasn't it? So yes, what we're doing here is more based around understanding what so like, this is an example. If you go, you can go to like next.finatr.com is the so like, this is the stable version. There's a next.finatr.com, which is the whatever's on the next branch. there is an examples tab, and you can just pull in an example to give you an idea of like what we're going for here. But the idea is that like if you know, like I got to do groceries, and I do groceries. Apparently, I go to the grocery store. In this example, I go to the grocery store every day, and I spend $150. Is that right? Every This daily rate seems off. So, and again, this is the stuff that having project days like these and looking at and tweaking them and fixing them is something that I think will be nice to do. So, like here, this is every one day, I think is what it's trying to say. So put a pin in like we should probably tweak the language there because that's not great. But then we can look at if we know the schedule that we're doing the thing on. So like this is happening on every day apparently, and here like going out. So going out to the bar, every 5 days you go out to the bar, and you spend $80. If you know a frequency of what you do, or how often you do a thing, and some of these things like groceries or going out can be a little bit more fuzzy. So that's something that I haven't really got into as far as the software goes, but there's some level of like what is that called? There's a specific kind of analysis where you can say give numbers a range instead of an actual value, and you can then calculate like a like probability of where you're going to land in that range. And then there's some level of like, well, if we have 10 transactions and they all have a range, you now sort of have like a potential minimum, a potential maximum, a potential like, what would be a reasonable average. And there's, what is that called? I'm going to remember it. Join the Discord because I'm sure I'm going to remember it and I'll drop it in the Discord later. But there's ways you can kind of like analyze that idea of like, once you know in general or frequency of how often you're doing a thing, you can then determine basically like how much you're spending every day. And again, that can also potentially be on a range. And you can start to see like self, presuming these daily rates are correct, because this grocery one feels off. You can start to look at like, well, if I know that I qualify things as fun, I'm spending this amount of money, it comes out to a daily rate. Like you can start to see the relative amounts that like my student loan payment is half my grocery bill. What if you make a calculation where you convert every transaction in a daily rate? Yes, exactly. And that's what we're going for, Chaup. Once you sort of have a daily rate, you can start to look at like this. And again, this graph can use some work. And if y'all are interested in this, it's all open source. Feel free to we can chat in the Discord or whatever. And if you see things that you're able to fix or deal with, I am happy to review those PRs. That would be lovely. But the idea of this graph is like the left side is how much you make in income. The right side is how much you're doing in expenses on like a monthly rate. Rent and electric and water, those are already generally on a monthly rate anyways. But you can start comparing it to like, like phone and cell phone. The relative amount of like how much I'm spending on fun versus my rent is huge. And this comes back again to, and I think is getting a little bit into your note, Paul, about the spending threshold. You like Simply, finances are make sure you make more money than you spend. It gets complex because you have um, loans and interest. And then you have the flip side where you have the same but for income. If I want to have money and retire, if I'm not going to be bringing in income from a salary, spending my time to gain money from a salary, I need a way to have money to be able to cover expenses. That's like investing in a 401k. The idea with a 401k or social security or anything like that is that once you're in a place where you can retire or you don't need to spend your time anymore to then get money, you're basically taking that money that's been accumulating and using that like income. So at the end of the day, like, you just need to be spending less than you're bringing in. Like, the math isn't hard. It's a human thing. um, and it's a human thing on many levels because the there's folks that want to separate you from your money, both for good reasons or bad reasons, um, and make these devices that can enable folks to, like, buy a house. It would be impossible to buy a house without a mortgage these days. I mean, folks can do it, but that's because they probably already had a house that they then sold because it has houses have gotten so expensive that they've almost had it and used it as an investment vehicle. Um, so at the end of the day, you're kind of like, your threshold is you want to spend less money than you make. But it's all kind of relative. Like, when you look at it like this, where my going out relative to my rent, there's a big difference there. So like, if I want to consider how I can change my equation, there's two ways you can go about it. You can reduce your expenses or you can make more money. Bring in, which side of the equation do you want to adjust? Ideally, you could adjust both at the same time. If you especially in tech with the ability to go remote, that means you can potentially make more money or make incomes that you might not be able to get in your area. But also, you might be able to move from a place on the west or east coast where prices are super expensive. At least in the US, on the west and east coast, the prices are super expensive. They're not necessarily better the more interior you go into the US, but they can be. And if that's something that like, I've talked to Chris about this. Like, Chris lives in a place that's not cheap, but Chris enjoys that. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's like, that's the choice that you're making. I'm living in this area because I enjoy living in this area. But if you're not enjoying living in the area, that could be potentially something that you can change and adjust this big rent number. And it might be more worthwhile to do that than like cut out Netflix. And speaking of Chris, so how do you integrate the idea that tracking daily or monthly spending misses the general service SaaS push for yearly subscriptions that happen once every 12 months? Um, I like that question. Um, in some ways, I'm wondering if this is like a softball question. Uh, so I'm actually curious if you like know the answer to this already, Chris. But because I have a feeling you might. But that, like, this is part of it too, where folks are like, if you're gonna use a thing and you're gonna use a thing for 12 months, it's beneficial to that company to get you to sign up for 12 months. it is potentially worth that trade-off of like switching for like you as a person subscribing. It's potentially worthwhile to make that trade-off to go from monthly to yearly. And I've done that in a bunch of cases. Like I think my email that I have set up, I think I have that. I think I pay for that every 3 years or every 2 years. Um, like I felt comfortable enough making that, like basically big purchase because I knew I was going to not change it for that amount of time. But now, how do you like keep track of that? It gets and this is the like financial vehicle issue where, um, the math is really easy. Don't spend more money than you make. But all the human parts of it and all the like marketing corporation, they figured out better ways to like separate you from your money that makes this less clear. So it's not that the math is hard, it's that in every way it is in a corporation's best interest to like make things less obvious. Because what they want to do is to get you to buy the thing. And if the cost is part of the issue, they're going to do, the psychology stuff to get you to think about the cost less. So like encouraging folks to do like the impulse purchases or, putting the price as $99.99. So $99.99. It doesn't feel like $100 because of human stuff. So in the same way, like this applies to like software, but also, like the streaming services. You pay $20 a month or whatever for whatever streaming service. Like what YouTube Premium, I think is like $15 a month or something like that. $20 a month. You can get some of this stuff on an annual basis or a biannual basis. But at the end of the day, you're still making you're making that choice to spend money now to have that service for a certain amount of time. So how do you start thinking about like making sure that you have enough money to, yeah, and actually I think Paul, do you have a way to separate your savings account stuff? Things like pockets which you can split your money into and allocate for different responsibilities, rent, holiday savings. Exactly. You're hitting right on the thing I was just getting into. One way to deal with the fact that like this subscription comes up every 12 months is that like I can use this idea of a daily rate as a way to understand that cost relative to the other things I'm spending money on. And like, do I still value that cost? If I know that cost is, if all my streaming services are 10% of my income, am I seeing that value reflected in how I'm using those services? Like that can be the question that you're asking. But when you're considering and thinking about how to pay for it, you need to make sure that you have enough money to pay for it. If it's coming up every 12 months, one of the ways you can deal with it is to save that monthly amount every month in a separate savings account. And then when that 12 month for all these, like in theory, all these costs could line up on January 1st. All of your streaming, like, maybe you have analytics on your website. Maybe you have, you pay for your email service. If all of those landed on January 1st, that could potentially be your whole income for that month. But at a daily rate, it isn't necessarily the situation. So I think one of the ways you can think about it is to make sure that you have enough and you're accumulating enough money based off that like daily rate to then pay that big outlay on January 1st. So that actually kind of comes back over to the idea of the cash flow analysis here. Because what you're trying to do is make sure that between all of your accounts, there's, and I do this too a little bit. I don't actually call it pockets like you do, Paul. But I've got, I think they're technically virtual accounts. As far as the bank is concerned, they're not actually like separate accounts. But in their UI, you can separate these like dollar amounts into buckets. So what I've done for like my property tax, I don't pay that as part of my mortgage. I pay that separately directly to the city. That's a big chunk of money. So what I do is I save enough money every paycheck or every month to then cover that expense at the beginning of the year. The idea with this cash flow, and this is something that it seems to be more common in the business space. And I actually worked for a company that did this for associations. So like homeowners associations, condo associations. It's the same idea. Like, yeah, exactly, Paul. You have a bucket for car maintenance. You can actually like look up and see for the car that you have, like what's a reasonable amount of what's the expected annual maintenance cost for this thing. So like every 5 years or every 3 years, you can update that number and say like, now my car is 100,000 miles into its life. What could I expect to spend on maintaining this vehicle for the next year? And then you could save that amount of money or potentially a little bit more if, depending on how you're feeling about your car, and just have like a car maintenance account. So a separate account makes that clear that is separate money. You don't have to, like, it's not a requirement. But it's one of the ways that you can like make it obvious for your, again, like 95% of this is human. It's one of the ways that you can kind of like look at your banking balances and just immediately know how much money you have for it. So you can do it as like a single account, and the idea still holds. You want to make sure that like if you have maintenance expense every 6 months, you want to be able to save enough money to cover that cost that lands every 6 months. So the idea with a cash flow analysis is that if we know or we have some guess on the frequency, and this comes back into, man, it's really bugging me. There's a okay, we're gonna try it. We're gonna try doing a quick Google search. You don't know the exact amount of expense, right? So like, it's a guess. At some level, you're guessing like, is your car going to need tires replaced? That's a little bit more consistent. Like you can sort of get a good feel for how much that's going to cost and how often you're going to do it relative to how often you're using the car. But like, who knows if your engine goes, or like, there's all those other things that can go wrong in a car. That like, how do you plan for that? So like your engine going, you might have a warranty on your car's engine for 100,000 miles. So in theory, if anything goes wrong in that 100,000 miles, you wouldn't need to pay for it, or potentially pay less. But once you get outside of that, I mean, it gets to the point where some of those things fail, and like it's not worth actually putting that amount of money into the car anymore because it's so old that it's not actually worth it. And that's where that like some of the stuff. So coming back to what I was talking about with in a previous life, I did inspections for like homeowners associations or condo associations. Um, what they do is the idea of an association is there's a shared group, the association, which is maintaining things, pieces of the property, pieces of a building, um, in sort of like a shared group type of way. So like a homeowners association might own a pool and a pool house, and everybody in that association is effectively paying money to maintain that. Um, that's not the type of thing that makes. I mean, it does happen because of poor planning, but like you don't want to run into a huge issue and have to replace the pool at 60. Like once the pool's like 60 years old, it gets to the point where it's very difficult to maintain it, and you might need to actually replace it. You don't want to pay that whole amount in year 60. You want to be able to like over those 60 years basically save enough money to cover that cost. um and every one of these things has sort of this lifespan, or sort of like an expectation of like what is going to be the cost to maintain it. um and that's effectively how insurance is working. Insurance, the the thing that keeps those businesses alive is the data. They have so much data on this that they can make a prediction to where the money they're bringing in will cover the costs for replacements. So, in paying for insurance, in some ways, is like uh, um, uh, you also like have to have insurance on your car. If I think all of the U.S. has that requirement where you need insurance on your car, like it's a legal requirement. But like that's effectively what it is. You're relying on somebody else to do the planning for replacement of stuff. The Bayes formula. That's not actually the one that I was thinking of before, but um, let's Bayes formula. Yeah, that makes sense. And like that's all it is. It's this is much more involved math, and you start to get into like statistics and probability and that sort of thing. And like that's the kind of stuff that would be valuable to do, but I'm not going to do it unless it's just automatically done for me. But the fact that we can sort of like incrementally get value out of the fact that we have an idea of like how often these things happen, I can fill this in. I like this information, I can fill this in. Some of it potentially I would be a little bit more fuzzy on, and being able to like input ranges or something would be would improve that process. So like potentially eventual future or eventual feature. But like if we can codify that in here and basically say, well, this thing or the fact that this thing is occurring at some frequency, or like um we can potentially put in like API calls or put it in directly into the software where like we know you have this car, we know it's going to be this amount of maintenance, that we would recommend you save this amount. Yeah. So like that data is what drives the insurance companies, and they can use that data on like how often this stuff happens to then predict like what kind of cash flow they need. So you'll see. So we were doing cash flow analyses for the like homeowners association. We would basically say, this is all the stuff that you own. This is how much we're expecting you to need to pay for the thing when it's replaced. With considering inflation, that all basically boils down to like save this amount of money every year. If you save this amount of money every year, you should be, you know, pretty close to being able to cover everything for the next 20 or 30 years. Obviously, once you get to 30 years, things get even more and more fuzzy. And that's where some of the more advanced probability math would be potentially helpful. But then, basically we would say every like 3 to 5 years, just update that. And that's kind of what you're doing here, is that like based off the information that I have now, you know, double check the time here. we're diving in here. Based off the information that I have now, how much money do I need to be saving, or how much money do I need to be putting aside for this thing to be able to not have to worry? And like this actually kind of comes back around to as a metaphor for how we're doing our tests. If I'm writing a test, the reason I'm writing the test is to reduce the risk of just things going wrong. What I'm doing with the planning here is understanding, it's helping me to understand what I value, and to then make sure that I have saved enough money to either represent that value or be able to like cover the thing, like some of it is a needs versus wants. There's many cities where you need a car, like it's just built around that. So like to be able to get that income, I have to have that car. So like I have to be able to have enough money to be able to pay for that car. So this planning is to help you de-risk that situation where something goes wrong and you don't have enough money to cover it. But at the end of the day, you still need to be bringing in enough money to be able to cover stuff. So like you could do all the planning and it still might not be enough. But what we're ultimately getting to is that if we have an idea of like how often this stuff happens, kind of coming back to Paul's thought, if we have a bucket for car maintenance, we know that we might draw from that bucket every 6 months. We can then say, well, if we're putting in X number of dollars, let's look at, we don't need the IRA. Is that the checking? Yeah. So the checking here, we can say, well, we're putting in a certain amount of dollars. That's represented by the green bars. Anytime we spend money, that's represented by the red bars. We can then say, well, over the next months, what's the trend here? Are we over time spending more money than we're bringing in? Or do we have enough money to actually cover all those expenses? And that's kind of where you can either bucket it out. Like this, in theory, deals with, like already deals with any number of accounts. I've got my personal stuff in this, and there's other features that I want to add, but it functionally covers the things that I'm looking at right now. You just want to make sure all those accounts stay above zero. And there's potentially more math, like you could do this Bayes formula thing, or this other one. Let's see if we can figure it out. We got like 5 minutes. Let's see if I can remember what it is. Probability formula for numbers with ranges. It's something with an M. With ranges. Like when I see the word, I'm gonna know it's that. It's like all I can think of is Mardi Gras. It's the Mardi Gras theory. Speaking of like planning for things that bring happiness, formula for let's just stick prediction on the end of this. starts with M. Um, what is it? It is like a. It kind of looks like the word Mardi Gras. Prediction interval. And there's actually been a couple of SaaSes that like, they were more targeting the corporate folks doing this. So basically, like an Excel sheet that applied this as a SaaS. But they ended up, I think they ended up shutting down that company a few years ago. Actually, probably more than a few at this point, but they just weren't able to like make the money they needed to keep the thing going. And like that's part of the reason that I've made this app and kept it as a OSS. It doesn't feel like the type of app that I want this app to exist. I think is valuable for folks, and I want it to be a thing. But the business just there's really not a business here because the amount of money the folks are going to spend on this relative to like infrastructure slash maintenance costs slash if somebody's paying money for this, then they want to probably have imports from their bank or something like that, and the cost to maintain and pay for a service that does that, because that's like the only way you can do it in the US, it's that would be your full cost. Like people would basically be paying that bill for you, and that would you not make any money out of it. So we went with open source. No, not margin, not Markov chain. It is a mean my no no no. It's like it's a theory. It's a theory starts with M predicts probability of numbers with ranges. M theory? No. Monte Carlo. You got it. That's it. Yep. Monte Carlo. Good call. Thank you. That was driving me bonkers. Wait, how do you spell it? Monte Carlo simulation. I want to add this in here. This has been on my like back my brain to-do list for a long time, but it's it wouldn't be difficult to do. It's just there's a lot of we had a race here. Chat GPT versus Google. There's a lot of like foundational stuff that I needed to get in place to get to the point where we could actually like make it happen. I think we're very close, if not there, ready to where we could put a Monte Carlo simulation in here. And the idea is basically that like, it's like and it comes back to this like Bayes thing too. There's a bunch of ways you can basically, apply a formula to then help you predict based off of inputs about, like what would be like the average effectively. So putting it into numbers, if your car maintenance cost ends up being say $400 to $600 every 6 months, how do you translate that into how many dollars I need to save every month? I mean, you could like conservatively just assume it's going to be $600, which might be fine. But there's a little bit more of like this going on where like there's a chance that it could be 400. There's also theoretically a chance it could be 0. there's also a chance it could be 1200. But those, you get some like probability curve that like, um, given a range, and like the range potentially representing, sort of that probability curve, maybe you save $550 a month. So not quite the 600, but like it's a little bit closer to the 600 than the 400. That's the kind of probability kind of stuff that I would like to add to this, because I'm not going to do the math, but we're putting in all the information that we need to actually do the math. So if this just does the math for us and says, well, based on your inputs, probably just save this amount. Sweet. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think we can effectively just codify. And then folks are just putting in the information that they know and have an understanding of. And again, this comes back a little bit to the budgeting, where you might need to go through the effort of budgeting to understand what you're spending first. But once you have a good idea of that, and yeah, none of this is going to be perfect. Like you're saying, Chow, but there's a reason insurance companies exist and why they make money. And they're actually having a really hard time right now because their data said that they could get this amount of money and cover costs. But now climate change is a thing. So like that hasn't really been figured into their models well. And they're just dropping folks in, like California, because they're models to represent the risk to cover all these wildfires is just wrong, to the point where they basically say we can't insure anybody here anymore because our data is just not sufficient enough to like represent this, or the cost that they would expect people to pay is just outlandish. So as you're itched to kind of throw your bank expenses into this, and then it starts to auto budget suggestions based on math. Kind of, yeah. The idea is that I could ask folk. I don't want to be offensive here, but like people that aren't finance nerds, ask them for information that they would be able to understand and input, and then basically kind of do what you're saying, is that like based on some potentially formulas, prediction models. I mean, even the simple prediction model of like you put in your reoccurring expenses, we know when it's going to go below zero. Like there's there's multiple steps here where you can get to, and this comes back to, how are you planning for 3 months away? How are you planning for 6 months away? 3 years, 5 years, 10, 30 years? I think the answer changes. And I think applying these models are going to be like, there's not going to be a model or a formula that is going to be applicable for every situation. So how are you thinking about the next 3 months? Like this is fine. This, I think I have this going out March. This goes out a year. After about 6 months, it's kind of hard to rely on this because you're also relying on every expense being in here and like perfectly represented. So I mean, you can use the idea of this graph, but then apply something like the Monte Carlo simulation and have a better idea of like what is 3 years out, what is 5 years out. And then once you start saying, well, like what's 30 years out? How do you represent that? And it's going to be a lot of fuzzy math. And that's the stuff that I wouldn't expect um, anybody but finance nerds to actually like get into and dig into. Um, but if somebody can put in this information and we can say, give them ranges or give them an idea of how much money they need to save now, I think that is going to be valuable for a lot of folks. Because there is some level of like, we can do a Monte Carlo simulation based off of their 401k with some expectation of like, if things do reasonably well, there's ranges, and like you apply ranges to like every one of those variables. We can do a Monte Carlo simulation to say, well, with like 95% certainty, we can say save this much a month and you're probably going to be pretty okay. And obviously there's nothing stopping folks from doing more than that. And I think that would be the valuable, like that would be the value of having this information available. If I know this type of information, and from some rough calculations, I can have some level of like de-risk or confidence that like what I'm doing now is going to be good for the next 30 years. I think that's what we're shooting for here. Uh, what are we doing for time? Ooh, I actually got to get going here. Yes, meeting time. Could you have a historical graph and it compared to the future? In theory, I think anytime you start getting into the historical data, then you, um, like, I'm not going to rule that idea out, but I think as soon as you start getting into historical data, there's so much effort that you need to put into, um, to get that data in a place where it actually is correct. By the time you do that, nobody ends up looking at the graphs like that. I mean, there might be a little bit of bias there, but that's definitely how me and the folks that I've spoken with, close friends, family, or whatever, um, if they've done anything like this, they went through that effort and then like they either just stopped doing it, or they're just like going. It ends up just becoming a chore, and there ends up being no derived value from that, because like it doesn't matter what my decisions were in 2023. Those, I can't change anything there. The only thing I can do is change how I'm handling things now. So if I know what my present situation is, the only thing I can do is affect my future. I can't change the past. So like at some level, having the ability to compare or have historical data is just a like finance nerd, I like to look at the numbers kind of situation. Like a in some ways almost just like a vanity metric sort of thing. Which isn't to say like don't do that. Like I've done that, and I mean for like 10-15 years I did that. Um but there's I think the most value I think can be found in understanding from your present situation, what do I need to do to make a better future? Yeah. And yes, again, like I'm never going to say don't budget, but at some point those you start to see those trends and they just always happen. And um so like there is value in doing that and understanding that and knowing that. But like I said, I did it for 15 years or something. um I don't need to continue to do that to know that how I spend it on those time periods. So like I have a good enough feel that I could just make a prediction on how much I'm gonna need to put aside for Christmas presents. Um, If you don't have a good feel for that, then yeah, that's where budgeting could potentially be helpful. And I don't think this is a thing that is going to replace budgeting apps. I think it is a supplement or eventual replacement. Like once folks get to the point where they understand how they are spending and how they have spent, and they're not deriving value from historical information anymore, I think this is could then effectively be a replacement. But I think even until you get to that point, using this as a tool to where like you're looking at this graph to just see the differences between income and expenses, like that's it's almost like an incremental dive into your future. If you need to go through all the effort of doing a budget and understanding how you're spending, you still can get value out of it by going through this as well. Do them both at the same time. And as you start to really get a good feel for and understand your budget, you can then sort of like incrementally adopt and like get to the point where this is the kind of stuff that you're finding value in. So like, I'm not expecting somebody to come in and, I mean, initial users, yeah, probably, because like the reason they're doing this is because they want these like fancy graphs and models and predictions and stuff. I don't expect down the line folks coming into this are immediately going to jump into like the real advanced stuff. So there, I have some expectation of like incremental adoption where you understand your income versus your expenses and you build on that. But this has been a great discussion. I got a meeting to hop over to. I would love to continue the conversation. Hop in the Discord. And yeah, hop in the Discord. We can buttons. There we go. I would love to keep talking about it. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I think I started this back in like 2011. So I'm always going to enjoy having the conversation. So hop on the Discord. Others we'll probably keep bringing it up on stream. I got to run to a meeting though. Have a great rest of your week. Happy Tuesday. I'll get a scheduled stream up so we know what the topic is for next week. Probably something a little bit different, but we'll see you then. Bye.